bus driver from Citadel Effects on the bench today. This is a compressor pedal based on the iconic SSL Bus Comp. You've got controls for compression, makeup gain, attack, and release, a button to select between 3 different ratio values, another button to select between 3 different sidechain high-pass filter values, and then a really cool feature here, if you press both buttons together, you can toggle auto-release on and off. There's also a gain reduction meter on the side of the pedal. Now, if you're somebody who's really experienced using compression, I think you're going to love the sound of this pedal and the feature set that it offers up. It is very unique for a compressor pedal, but if you're somebody who doesn't really know where to start with dialing in compression, I also want this video to serve as a tutorial so that you can go and dial in just about any compressor that you like. So there's 2 elements here. There's the character that we're going to get out of this SSL bus style compressor, and then there's how we would set up a compressor, looking at the interaction between the different controls. So let's just hear the starting point. This is a Tyler JTG on the neck single coil. The guitar's preamp is disabled. This is what I've got. We're going to start with a very low amount of compression on here. If you pay attention to the gain reduction meter, it'll probably be between 4 and 6 dB of gain reduction. I've compensated for that by setting the makeup control around 9 o'clock, and I've got the auto release engaged over here. So just ignore the release control for now. We're going to pay attention to how the attack control is changing the amount of gain reduction for a given compression value, and how it also changes the tone and the character. I've also got this sidechain high pass filter control set flat, so that's not really doing anything at the moment. Let's check it out. So all we were changing there is the attack and the ratio. Now the ratio is going to control how squished our tone gets on there, but the attack control, it's really important to understand here. Basically, the lower I had that control, you notice that there was slightly more gain reduction given that compression value, and it just kind of sounded squishier and you heard the effect a little bit more. That's because it is catching more of what I'm playing into it. And you probably noticed that while I was digging in, the overall tone didn't change that much with the uncompressed sound and the compressed sound, but when I played lighter, when I played those arpeggios on there, you could hear that without the compressor, it was all quieter. But with the compressor, it kind of brought everything up. It made it sound a little more even and beefier on there. And going for those lower compression values and cranking the makeup gain can actually give you a really great boost. This is a really nice trick that you can use a compressor for, where the compressor's not doing a whole amount, so we'll leave the ratio on its lowest value over there. And just have a listen to what the makeup gain does here. This is a great alternative to an overdrive or a boost. hear that the bus driver has a lot of character on there. This is only going to get more exaggerated as I crank the comp up. So let's just bring the makeup gain down a little bit. And again, let's just have some fun. This time, I'm going to leave the attack where it is. Auto release is still on. I'm going to experiment with the amount of compression and the ratio. That is glorious. I love how squishy that is getting, but you hear the overall effect is it fattens everything up and is fantastic on chords. It's also fantastic on those funky single notes on there. It just adds so much girth and body on there. It's like a cheat code if you're playing with a clean guitar sound. So I feel like if you want that embiggening effect out of a compressor, start with a low attack and don't be afraid to really slam the compression and the ratio on there. Another thing we can do, again, we've still got the auto release on now, is to play around with the release parameters. So I'm going to press these two. That's going to let me actually use the release control on here. So think of the release, well, think of a compressor like holding your breath, for example, and the attack is how sharp of a breath in you take. So a slower attack is like taking a nice long breath in, and then the release will be like how long it takes you to breathe out on there. If you're going to yell out, maybe you'd have a really short release. If you were just going to slowly release it on there, that's like having a long release over here. So my kind of go-to, if I want a really short attack on here, so let's turn this down. Let's have a listen to what a short release does or then a long release. And again, pay attention to the gain reduction meter on there. I'm just going to bring this control down. Let's just set the ratio to max on here because life's too short not to crank compressors. extreme settings on there, you can make this compressor absolutely obliterate your guitar sound on there. When I switched over to the bridge humbucker, you could hear everything kind of sucked right down. That's a pretty cool effect on its own. But you notice that basically setting both controls up high or both controls down low, or having them at the opposite extremes, all has a different character, a different feel to it, and it's very hard to communicate that feel. That's why I'm stressing listen and have a look at the gain reduction meter on here. But far out, this thing sounds fat. I love that. What I want to do is use this kind of sustainer setting. So the attack right down, the release cranked up over there, and the ratio actually at its minimum value. But I want to do this with a lead sound just to show you how you can use this as a tonal enhancer. So much fun. Another cool trick you can do is going for a relatively fast attack on here. I've got the auto release set on already. I think that auto release is just such a fantastic quality of life control to have on here if you can't be stuffed futzing around with the release control. You can see the other settings on there, and I'm going to use a giant chungus kind of chugga guitar tone on here. We're going to use this with the ratio on the second setting over here just to kind of tighten everything up, and again use that fattening, embiggening tone on there. What I'm then going to do is use this sidechain high pass filter. Listen for when I'm really muting aggressively, how that changes the character. Now, trying to listen to videos about compression can be really hard to hear the difference, and that sidechain high-pass filter can be even harder on top of all of that. But what I was hearing with it at the minimum value is that it's just kind of catching a little bit more of the low end, so everything's a little bit more consistent, whereas cranking it up kind of lets the low end bounce a little bit more, if that makes sense. So using it with the distorted sound on there, I kind of liked having that option on there, almost to just kind of tailor how extreme the chugs sound, and then playing funky stuff like that just depends if you want to have that super squishy, consistent compressed sound, or if you still want to be able to really hear those pops in there. Hopefully this all made sense on here. This has been such a fun pedal to play around with, and this is going straight onto my studio board. This is probably my favorite compressor pedal that I've ever played, and for what I like being able to absolutely obliterate the sound and get a super squishy, like unnatural guitar tone out of a compressor. And it does that. Can also do the far more subtle things on there. Just the range of controls, the different ratio options, the different sidechain options. The auto release on there is so fantastic. If you want to use it like a subtle tonal enhancer to fatten and embiggen your guitar tone and basically act as a cheat code, does that really well. It can be nice and unobtrusive, but it also goes where other compressor pedals don't, where you can really use this as an effect. I want to say a massive thank you to the team at Citadel for getting this out to me. I've got demos of their entire range of pedals, and I think this is definitely a company to keep your eyes on. I'm really looking forward to what they come out with in the guitar space. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, links to the music that I make with my band Ragdoll and my Patreon are in the video description. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you all on the next one.